Good morning and welcome. I'm Richard Sachs, Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs at the University of RIo Grande and RIo Grande Community College in beautiful southeastern Ohio. And here in early June, it's my pleasure and delight today to greet Debbie Saunders, who is the director of the Bossard Public Library in Gallipolis. I've known Debbie for about 4 years. When I came here and joined Gallipolis Rotary, and I think we met first at Rotary.
Yes, we did.
And I've always had a close place in my heart as a lit professor for public libraries and the incredible things that they do. And Debbie and her staff at the Bossard do a number of remarkable things. The reason Debbie's here today is we have Ohio Chautauqua here at in downtown Gallipolis from last night, from June 12th through June 16th. And Debbie is the director of the Ohio Chautauqua in Gallipolis group. And so, Debbie, can you just start by telling us a little bit about what is Ohio Chautauqua and what it's doing here in Gallipolis?
Sure. Ohio Chautauqua is a 5-day community event. It brings living history to the stage. It's paired with live local music. And just a wonderful experience for people from all walks of life to come under the big red tent in the Gallipolis City Park and learn about these unique characters in history. And many of these characters, obviously, for example, the 5 we have this year, none of them are still living. And so this is our best chance we have to get to know this character as these scholars have studied these characters very much in depth and taken them on. In fact, they don't really go out of that role while they're on stage until there's a section for question and answer with the scholar. So it's a great coming together of community to learn about these historical figures that have such an impact on our nation's history and world history.
That's great. And those of you who live in or near Gallipolis, which is in Gallia County right on the river, this is the downtown park, the 200-year-old downtown park, and there's literally a big tent, like a big Chautauqua tent, as in Western New York. And I love, as a lit prof, I love the metaphor of a big tent.
Yes.
A lot of people come together under the big tent. And as you've said, the people we have, Irma Bombach, Cesar Chavez, Betty Friedan, Ben Davis, Robert F. Kennedy, coming from different ethnic and racial backgrounds, coming from different perspectives, from different walks of life. But what all these people share, besides being 19th century Americans, is, I think, is that the period 1968 to 73 is being focused on, and all of these Americans were very important during that period.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So last night we started, and we always have music 6:30 to 7:15, and then the actor for the evening comes on at 7:30. Last night, I guess we had a cancellation 4 or 5 weeks ago, and Linda Sigismondi, who is a tenured biology professor here and plays beautiful dulcimer. She had a larger and a smaller dulcimer and a wooden flute. And she sang some folk songs and did a wonderful job. And I can't think of a better way to start a Chautauqua in Appalachia than somebody playing dulcimer. It just seemed so local and so right.
Exactly.
Excuse me for bragging about one of my faculty members, but I just thought it was wonderful. And then a 15-minute break, and then Irma came on at 7:30, Susan Marie Franzak. And boy, did she rock Irma Bombach. As Debbie said, first third or even first half speaking as Irma Bombach, then answering questions as Irma Bombach, and then the third area, more general questions and perspective questions. Tonight we have the Gotham City Brass Quintet. Really, from Gotham City? Wow. I don't know if that's New York City or is that Batman's Gotham City. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
I'm looking at the wrong calendar.
Okay.
Tonight we have, CeCe Miller.
Yes.
And do you want to tell us about CeCe
Sure,
Miller? She'll be the
sure.
musical act.
Yes, CeCe is a native Gallia County resident, and she performs. She has beautiful vocals, and also I believe is going to bring in some acoustic guitar with her performance this evening. So we're really excited about her. Again, it's bringing that local musicians a chance to showcase their talent under the Chautauqua stage. And again, I can't stress enough how important this is, that it's a community-wide event. So what better way to have these local musicians shown than bring them under the Chautauqua tent?
Yeah, no, that's great. And I already saw Fred Blanco as Cesar Chavez at the library yesterday afternoon. Please realize as well, every day this week we have 10:30 a.m. youth shows, I'm sorry, youth presentations, and 2:30 p.m. adult presentations. And I've been to both, and they are both very appropriate for teens and adults, whether it's youth or adult. Fred did a great job yesterday afternoon talking about the Zoot Suit riots. And one thing that excites me is one of the seminal points of the 1960s is when Robert Kennedy visited Cesar Chavez, and they took communion together. They were both Catholics, and that so we actually have these two historic figures. I don't know if they're going to mention this at all, who connected with each other. But again, Cesar Chavez being the founder of the United Farm Workers, initially United Farm Workers Organizing Committee. Those of you who are old enough to remember boycott lettuce or boycott iceberg lettuce and then boycott grapes, and those were all things that came about in the early 1970s from Cesar Chavez. And then Thursday we have music by the Aerial Singers. Now we have an Aerial Theater in downtown Gallipolis. Are they associated with the theater then? Yes, they are.
Okay. We're really pleased to be able to have these singers showcased under the tent, because also I want to mention on that note, Richard, that the RIo Theater is our alternate site should inclement weather pop up under the tent. We do have an alternate site in the RIo Theater, which just is adjacent to the Gallipolis City Park. So you can stay parked where you're parked and still take in Ohio Chautauqua. But having said that then, the theater helps us in many ways, one of which, of course, is the alternate site should there be a weather issue crop up. But also 2 different nights, and we'll probably talk about this in a minute, I would expect. The RIo Singers will be there Thursday, and then as we're going to talk about a little later, the RIo Tuba will be Saturday night. So a great partner in the RIo Theater, and we thank Laura Snow and her staff for that.
Right, great. And I know talking with Erin yesterday from Ohio Humanities, she was checking the weather and everything else. And of course, when you have an outside thing under a big tent, you want to be outside, but it's wonderful that everybody's working together so that we have that rain option.
Exactly.
And then, of course, Thursday night is Betty Friedan. I don't know if our population is familiar with Betty Friedan. As somebody who's taught courses on the American 1960s 3 times, I can tell you she is incredibly important because she wrote The Feminine Mystique in 1963. And literally our use of the term feminine and feminism comes from that book in 1963. Also in the late 60s with Gloria Steinem, she founded Ms. Magazine. And of course in 1970, Judy Cyphers then wrote the article for Ms. Magazine, Why I Want a Wife. I don't know if you've ever read that.
What are you telling me about?
It's a phenomenal article that essentially says all these things that a wife does. And even though she's a heterosexual female, she wants a wife. Because look at all the things that a wife does.
Yes.
And that is the most anthologized, as of the year 2000, I don't know if that's still the case, that was the most anthologized magazine article ever in any freshman reader in the United States. So we have generations of college students who are reading things because of the magazine that Betty Friedan founded. And so again, that's Thursday night. And I know Betty, the person who's playing Betty Friedan, Sally Ann Drucker, is an English professor at Nassau Community College on Long Island. And then Friday, oh my gosh, Gavin Davis, is he really doing the music?
Well, he was scheduled to do it and had a conflict. So to go with the theme of the evening, which is Benjamin O. Davis Jr., we're going to have Lawrence Green, who will do African drumming.
Okay.
So it's a real celebration of African American history under the tent on Friday, June 15th.
Okay.
So,
well, that's a good comeback then. Gavin is wonderful. He's been a CCP student here from River Valley High School, and he's an extraordinary pianist, a classical and a jazz pianist as well as a guitar player. So I'm not sure what he was going to play, but I'll look forward to Lawrence Green and the drumming.
Yes.
And keep in mind, Friday night is Benjamin O. Davis, who was the first general in the U.S. Air Force. Lived a long 90-year life. I was in his presence once in Cleveland in 1970 or 71 when he was named police commissioner there right after he retired by Carl Stokes, who was the first African-American mayor of Cleveland. And so General Davis had a long and distinguished life. He's played by Jim Armstead, who is doctorally prepared and served like 30 or 40 years in the Army in various roles. I just had lunch with him at the Colony Club, and I do want to do a shout out to the Colony Club.
Yes, absolutely. Let's do that.
If you guys are not familiar with downtown Gallipolis, we have two wonderful historic theaters, the Ariel Theater, which is still used as a theater, and the Colony Club, which was renovated about 2 or 3 years ago into a restaurant with the same ability to project movies. So even though I have 2 graduate degrees from Michigan, I will say that every Ohio State home game in the fall on Saturdays is being shown there. And if
Can I say go Bucks?
Oh, you're allowed to say go Bucks. Do you know what? It should be much more collegial between those two schools, and it used to be.
Yes.
We don't need to get nasty about
That's
that.
Right,
it is a friendly competition. But a lot of people don't know General Davis the way the other 4 characters are, I think, much more clearly seen. And again, his father was the first general in the U.S. Army. And he was then the first general in the U.S. Air Force, which is and both men lived 90 years. I mean, they had incredible legacies. So I'm excited about people learning. And, you know, as I looked around last night and I saw the 235 people, I think was the count we had.
Yes.
I thought people are benefiting from this. This is free. Yes. This is essentially some pittance of your tax dollar. But again, supporting things like Ohio Humanities Council, things like the National Endowment for the Humanities, this is why we can offer things like this, plus a lot of fundraising, by you and other people. I mean, Ohio Valley Bank, the Gallia Convention and Visitors Bureau. I mean, there's so many people to thank.
We do. And Richard, one thing I want to make a point too, it's been so interesting having you on a committee because you have so many, like, you know, when Richard first came on the committee, I remember our first meeting was, well, I remember seeing this person in Cleveland, or I know this tie. So it was really neat because you really felt like you could bring in, he brought it close to home, I guess is what I'm saying, because of his experiences in that Cleveland area. So I just want to kind of shout out to you there because it's just been so interesting to work with someone that says, I know a lot of that history because I saw this person in this city and what have you. So it was really interesting. So.
Yeah. Well, I had such a nice time last night. I think in part because I had very few responsibilities. I just had to be there and enjoy it. But afterwards, a number of people came up. Oh, thank you for all. Oh, because you called us up on stage.
Yes,
and
I
said,
did.
And said, here's my committee.
Yeah, yes.
And that's why people were thanking me afterwards. They're like, thank you for all you do. Thank you for all you do. And I kept saying, I love doing this. Even if I weren't provost, if I lived here, I would come.
Yes.
There are parts of my job I don't like heading up an academic integrity panel when a student's cheated, or when I have to do faculty evaluations of an underperforming faculty member. Those things are not fun, but they're part of my job. This is so much fun, and I can't tell you, I keep getting chills up and down my back as all these wonderful things are happening, as little children are learning. Like this morning, the children's thing at the library, we had 8 or 10 kids there. We should have had 50. He talked about pitch and yaw and roll and about lift because he knows aerospace, and he was talking as an Air Force general. And it was fascinating to me as he talked about how they went from the two the old like Wright brothers type of planes to more modern planes. Yeah. And he talked about the fact they realized they had to move the propellers back because when they had crashes, they didn't want a spinning propeller to be close to the pilot. And they also learned in terms of lift. Think about it. If you're in a sailboat or even if you're in a car, it's the front end that's going to lift up first when you start to get airborne. And generally in sailboats and cars, you don't want to do that. But it's the same thing with the plane. It's the same principles of physics. And he talked about how they had to move the engines back further so that would put more weight in the back and make it easier for the front of the plane to start to go up. And that was fascinating to me. I mean, I was just sitting there, and I've flown so many times, and it's the miracle of flight that I think I understand better, and I fly so much, and especially when I fly big planes, like a 747 or a DC-10, I look at the plane, I think, that is tons and tons of steel. How can that fly? I don't even want to think about it. So I generally get workout, and even though I love takeoff and landing, I'll just focus like till we're airborne, because it doesn't make sense to me that that thing should be able to fly. But again, with what Dr. Armstead did this morning with that student group, I mean, talking about pitch and yaw and roll and lift and rotation and the various things that happen, it was fascinating.
Yes.
It really was. And then Saturday, our conclusion, music by the RIo Tuba Time.
Yes.
Can you tell me who they are?
Yes, a select group, and actually I think they've even had opportunities to perform other places as well as an organized group. But the RIo Tuba Time, again, Dr. Laura Snow, well, actually I don't think she's a doctor, but Laura Snow, she's the director of the RIo Theater, and really happy to have this. It's something we try to make sure that the entertainment is kind of eclectic, that it's not the same thing every night. So we have everything from, like Dr. Sachs said, as far as the flute to tuba time to a soloist. So it really runs the gamut. So you won't want to miss that either.
Yeah, and then Saturday night is Robert F. Kennedy, and Bobby Kennedy is being portrayed by Jeremy Meyer, who's a theater professor and directs the theater program at Owens Community College in Toledo. I'm good friends with Steve Robinson, the president, and Amy Giordano, their VP for Enrollment Management, is just brilliant. So I shot them both an email early this morning and said, we are enjoying having Jeremy Meyer down here. And Amy immediately emailed me back and she said, Jeremy's wonderful, that Amy has a 14-year-old daughter in high school who is in Jeremy's plays, and just said he's the nicest guy in the world, and he's also, from what I can see, a great dad.
Oh, yes.
Because he's got his 8 or 9-year-old daughter with him, and she's going everywhere.
Yes.
And
I remember the year Jeremy portrayed Oliver Hazard Perry. This was several years ago.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, and it was wonderful. And I remember that night under the tent, you know, it's the backdrop is the Ohio River. It's the back of the tent, really, the backdrop. And it was not storming in an unsafe way, but storming just enough to kind of set the tone for his monologue, in that he was talking about being on the high seas and it being stormy, and it really transported you there. So I've never forgotten Jeremy Meyer as Oliver Hazard Perry. He does that wonderfully as well.
I'll bet he does. I'll bet he does. And as Ohioans, if you have not been to the Ohio State House, you should go there to see the painting of Perry during the War of 1812. It's extraordinary, and again, it's one of the legacies that we have here in Ohio. Debbie, in the last 8 or 10 minutes we have, can you talk a little bit more about Ohio Humanities? And I would love to talk, but I talk too much as it is, about the National Endowment for the Humanities and some of these state and federal humanities organizations. And again, I'm not trying to make a political statement at all, but I'm just saying the NEH, the last time I checked, was funded at about $140 million a year, which is about 40 cents or 45 cents for each American. And I think I got more than 45 cents worth last night.
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely.
Not to mention tonight and the next night, the next night. So can you talk a little bit about how these things are funded? Because realize even the concessions here are free, either because of grants or because of donations or things like that.
Exactly. And one thing I wanted to mention too, Dr. Sachs, also is Gallup Police prides itself in having Ohio Chautauqua here for a record 7th time since 2006. And the Ohio Humanities, they really enjoy coming to Gallup Police because of the welcome that they get. And it is an issue where we have to look at funds being raised to be able to bring Chautauqua here. So obviously the Ohio Humanities sponsors part of that, but the local committee does as well. And so when we hear, again, not being political in any nature, but when we do hear there could be cuts to the National Endowment for the Humanities and then trickling down possibly to the state level, we are concerned because it's very important that we keep these arts and culture alive in our local communities, especially in the size of community we have, where there's cultural opportunities, but not like you would have in a major metropolitan area. Wouldn't you agree with that, Richard?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's very important that we keep that alive. And as Dr. Sachs mentioned, there are grants available through the Ohio Humanities. They do a lot of interesting programs and all about educating people. They have a speakers bureau where they can send people out and kind of what Chautauqua does, portray different characters. We've had some different ones at the library at different times. So it's very important that we do continue to support the National Endowment for the Humanities and, of course, in turn, the state Ohio Humanities. And although not necessary, there are opportunities to do that under the tent each night should someone decide they would like to give a donation to that effort.
Right. Well, I bought a T-shirt last night for $10,
Yes.
and I didn't think it was possible to buy a nice T-shirt
Yes.
these days
Yes.
for $10.
I'm going to get mine tonight.
And I was happy to be rocking Ohio Humanities.
We should have done that today.
I know. Well, I've got a dress up. I've got a dress up interview
Okay.
coming up, and that's why I'm more dressed up than the studio audience probably expects me. But well, thank you for saying that. And again, I think we want to emphasize that the program is really for all ages.
Really, yes, totally.
That even elementary school kids are enjoying it, but middle school, high school, adults, older people. And again, I agree with you. I think this is vitally important, and it's something that when we have that shared community feeling. I mean, Irma Bombeck, for those of you who remember her, she had columns in the newspaper about being a suburban housewife.
Yeah.
And her most famous book is The Grass is Always Greener Above the Septic Tank. And that gives you a sense of her sense of humor, that she looked at things that everybody is experiencing. And then
It could relate to.
exactly
Could relate to,
and,
yeah.
and then reflects on that.
Exactly, yes. And the thing I love about Ohio Chautauqua also is that people from all walks of life you'll see under the tent. There's no boundary there. It's wonderful that you see people that feel welcome, and they should, to come to this community event, that there's not that economic barrier of admission at the door. It's provided through the Ohio Humanities and the local fundraising. And so, but in order to keep these type of programs here, we have to have that community support. So we do ask that you come out to Ohio Chautauqua, either in Gallipolis, or as Dr. Sachs has here, can we hold up our,
Sure.
This is what's known as the companion reader that is being shown here. And it
It's
features
very
all,
educational.
Yes,
It's remarkable.
and it features all 4 cities that Ohio Chautauqua will be at in 2018, Gallipolis being one of those. I just went to Piqua, I think, last week.
Right, and then-
Going to Rossford next, June 19th through 23rd, and New Richmond, June 26th through the 30th. So if you can't catch it here in Gallipolis, if you're just getting to watch this and it's past the week, feel free to check out one of those communities as well. You don't have to be in that community to be able to attend. Again, it's for all. So really encourage that.
Right. And as Erin told me last night, I said, oh my gosh, so you have one small town in each of the 4 quarters of the state. She goes, that's what we try to do every 2 years. We're not always able to do it, but they're happy to do it that way. So everything we've talked about in this half hour so far is about how Ohio Humanities and the Ohio Chautauqua and our local efforts here are trying to create what we call a public conversation in the humanities. The whole idea that as Americans, to quote Bill Murray from Stripes, we've been kicked out of every decent country in the world. And that's not the whole story of Americans, but that's a lot of the story. People came here for something better. The American Indians were here. Of course, most African Americans were brought here, but still, the point is we are a polyglot country. We come from all these different backgrounds. And unlike most countries that are tribal or racial in origin, we're founded on an idea, that all men are created equal. And we have these basic values that we have. Those values have to be supported by public conversations. America has always had one of the highest literacy rates in the country. And again, as an American studies professor, there are a lot of reasons for that, in part because we were an overwhelmingly Protestant country and people wanted to read the Bible. And that was the initial pre-revolutionary reason you should read and write. And then, of course, there become other reasons, perhaps more mercantile or other. But the point being, we've always had a high level of literacy in the United States. And ideally, people make their own judgments and then vote and do other things to support the polity, to support the political structure and the social structure that we have. And how better to do this and ask the kinds of questions that we see these people asking about.
Exactly.
You're a young black boy, but you could become an Air Force pilot or an Air Force general. You have that capability. So I think that's part of it, is being able to dream.
Yeah.
And I think
exactly. And it starts those conversations. You know, those conversations might occur under the tent through the question and answer period that, you know, we talk about history repeating itself, and we talk about the fact that just different events in history, and so it gets the conversation going. That's one thing I love about Ohio Chautauqua, that typically that conversation may never happen just maybe when you run into someone in town or what have you, but you have this organized forum, if you will, under the tent where people can ask those questions to say, hey, how does this relate to modern day? You know, how did it happen back there then? What does that mean for us in these times? And helps us get through some of the questions we might have answers to in what's happening in today's world. So just shows that it comes full circle, really, I think. So.
Yeah, I agree with everything you say, and I would add to that too, things like conflict resolution. I mean, Cesar Chavez's situation saying, listen, the farm workers need and deserve more money to do the picking, and then you have owners saying, whoa, hold on, I'm barely making it. So, I mean, both those are valid viewpoints, but those people have to come together and have a conversation and figure out how can we do this so it's equitable for all people and also sustainable long term. And those are the kinds of conversations that we like to support. The other point I'd make is, and I'm sorry I don't have her name here, the executive director of Ohio Humanities.
Oh, Pat Williamson.
Yeah, Pat Williamson has been wonderful. And we've been talking about some possible grant possibilities in the future that RIo faculty might do in trying to draw down on some Ohio Humanities funds and being able to continue to do things. So I'm sorry we're in the last minute. There's so much more to say, and I probably talked too much and I didn't let you talk enough.
No, it's fine. No.
However, thank you for coming out here in the middle of the events.
Sure.
I know we're missing an afternoon event at the library, but we'll be there tonight for Cesar Chavez, and we hope to see all of you as well. Thank you very much,
Thank
Debbie.
you. Yes.